Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Make Happiness Happen podcast. I'm your host, Shelly, and on today's episode, we're diving into session 2 of our Draw the Circle 40-Day Prayer Challenge. It's time to start dreaming big dreams and praying big prayers. Hi, I'm Shelly Covert, and I have a question for you. Are you tired of putting on a fake smile and pretending you're happy when you're really not? Are you ready to stop chasing happiness and create it instead? This world we live in makes us believe we need something newer or bigger or better to be happy. But guess what? That's not real happiness. I'm going to teach you what I've learned about creating real, authentic happiness. So if you're ready to stop faking it and be happy for real, you're in the right place. This is the Make Happiness Happen podcast. Well, hello, my friends. I'm excited to say that we made it to session 2 of our Draw the Circle 40-Day Prayer Challenge. And guess what? I kept my promise to myself. I completed the challenge every single day this week. I really hope you were able to do the same. Now, I do want to give you a big shout out and a thank you to all of you because I'm pretty sure that without knowing you're listening to this podcast, I probably would have missed a couple of days. So thank you very much for helping me just stay accountable to myself and achieve the goal that I set for myself with this challenge. So this past week, it really was all about deciding what you're going to turn over to God in prayer. So that's what the challenge was for last week. It was also about creating the habit of praying each day. So I've added this prayer challenge to my daily gratitude that I do. That's actually called habit stacking. It's when you attach a new habit to an existing habit, and it's a great way to start building a new habit. I also feel like this past week was about learning to trust God in both the big things and the little things. So do you remember the question, when was the last time you were concerned about the Creator keeping the planets in orbit? I loved that example because it made it really obvious to me that I do trust God completely for the big things, like keeping the earth spinning. It's the little things where I struggle, like, is there enough money to pay all the bills this month? Was starting a business the right thing to do instead of going and working for someone else? Those are the things that I struggle with to trust God. Those are the things where I feel like my faith is lacking. Now, have you ever heard the phrase, let go and let God? That's what I thought about on days 3 and 4. I struggle a lot with control. I like to be the one making the decisions, the one calling the shots. But then at the same time, I kind of get exhausted being the one that's making the decisions and calling the shots. It's kind of exhausting being the one in charge all the time. Day 3 was a great reminder for me because it reminded me that I'm not the one in charge. God is. And I don't have to have everything all figured out. I don't need to know steps 1 through 100 of a project I'm working on. I just need to let God guide my steps. I need to turn my fears and worries over to Him and let Jesus take the wheel. Thank you, Carrie Underwood. So I also need to accept that there may be times in life when challenges arise. So my divorce is an example from my life. I can pray and pray and pray for God to change those situations, change a situation like that. I might try to pray away the challenge when instead I should be praying through it. Pastor Mark said that we're often so anxious to get out of our difficult, painful, or challenging situations that we fail to grow through them. We're so fixated on getting out of them that we don't get anything out of them. Right? I had to read that a couple of times, but it's like we forget that maybe that challenge is there, maybe that situation is there to help us learn a lesson. So we fail to learn those lessons that God is trying to teach us, and we fail to cultivate the character that He is trying to grow in us because we're focused on asking God to change our circumstance, and when we do that, we never allow God to change us. So one of my favorite kind of examples of this it's been a lot of years ago, and my dad and I were in the car. I was driving. We were back in my hometown, and we were driving by my old high school, and there's a railroad track right there. And right as we were getting up to that railroad track, of course, a train came, and the crossing arms went down. And I don't remember which one of us made the comment, but I have never been a patient person, or at least up until that point, I had not been a patient person. And it was just kind of a funny thing, kind of like, oh, yep, God's trying to teach me patience again. And that I think is kind of how some of our circumstances are. I really do believe that if there is a lesson in life that we're supposed to be learning and we choose not to learn it, God's going to give us a lot of opportunities to learn that lesson. And so if that's something maybe that you don't like those opportunities, then maybe we need to be kind of more aware of that lesson, be more willing to learn it so that we don't have to keep going through all those situations. Day 5 reminded me of the importance of starting a prayer journal. And a prayer journal is great because we can document our prayers, write down the things that we've been asking for or the things that the blessings we've been thanking God for. But we can also look back and read through all of our prayers over time. And that is a good reminder for us because we'll be able to see which prayers and how God is answering those. Day 6 for me was about being brave enough to ask God for anything. Now, obviously, God is not a genie in a bottle, but He does want us to come to Him in prayer for anything and everything. The prayers that honor God the most are the ones that we pray for the impossible things, the prayers that we pray for the things that we cannot do on our own. Now, it doesn't mean, like I said, that God's going to answer everything, yes. But I love what Pastor Mark says here. He said, God won't answer 100% of the prayers we don't pray, right? So, maybe He will answer it in the way that we want. And I can tell you that no matter what, God is listening. The answer might be a yes, it might be a no, it might be later, something like that. So just have the courage to pray for the impossible. And then if God does answer with a yes, have the faith to take the steps and do the actions and give God the glory. Day 7, this was actually my favorite day of the week because it reminded me that I need to change how I pray. All right. So many times we ask God to change something or do something in our life, and then we just sit and wait, right? But what if God is waiting for us to take the first step? We kind of have to be willing to put some skin in the game to show God that we're serious. We have to be willing to take that first step, to really act as if God is going to answer our prayer. And that first step, it really is often the hardest, but it can also be the most important. This podcast for me was really one of these things that I was afraid to take the first step. It really was the hardest. And I am so glad that I took that step because I really am enjoying this podcast. And I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. All right. So that kind of is a wrap up of week 1, days 1 through 7. And so the theme for this next week is dream big. Okay. So I love the words dream big. It always gets me so excited because dreaming is so much fun. But then I also get a little scared because if I'm dreaming something really big, then I kind of get scared about failing big also. Like if I don't dream big, then my failures aren't really all that big either. At least that's how it kind of feels for me. So Pastor Mark starts off this session in the study guide just reminding us that we need to make sure whatever we're circling in this prayer challenge needs to be bigger than we are. We need to dream big, okay? Even though it's scary. In other words, the thing we're circling in this prayer challenge, it needs to be something that we can't do on our own. It needs to be something that we need help from God for. That's how God is going to get the glory, by doing things that are beyond our ability and resources so that we can't take credit for them. One of the things Pastor Mark says in this session is, show me the size of your dream and I'll show you the size of your God. Now, I've followed Pastor Mark for a long time. I've heard him say that more times than I can count. And I'm going to admit that each time I feel this little twinge of guilt because I know that by being afraid to dream big, by being afraid to fail, I'm really making God small in my life, right? So I need to get over that. I need to have the courage to dream a dream so big that I know if I try to do it on my own, I will fail. Okay? The only way that I can achieve it is with God's help. And that is if it's His will for my life as well. But I also need to look at my failures a little different too. And maybe instead of thinking of them as failures, think about them as lessons. And what am I learning in this process? Because maybe it's not the achievement of the dream or reaching that dream that's important. Maybe it's what I'm learning along the way and how I'm changing along the way and the person that I'm becoming along the way. Okay. So our big dreams, okay, they honor God. Their dreaming is a form of praying, and the more we pray, the more we dream, the bigger our dreams will become. That means that we're going to need to be praying even more, because these God-sized dreams, they can be scary, right? Because they are beyond our ability and our resources. They do require us to be dependent on God. So I want you and me and all of us to keep dreaming, keep praying, and keep waiting and watching for God to show up and show off his power. Right? Now it's time to grab your study guide and to get started on session 2. Okay, there's some questions in the book. Go through and answer those, reflect a little bit on your answers from last week and what you took away from days 1 through 7, and then watch the video if you did get the study guide videos. And then continue on this week. We'll go through days 8 through 14. And I'm also going to share the links in the show notes to those short daily videos on Pastor Mark's YouTube page. I hope you've been enjoying those. And then if you have any questions, the link for the question box is in the show notes. And if you still need to get your study guide and your Draw the Circle book, I'll put those links in the show notes as well. But all right, I hope you have a good week, and I will chat with you next week on this. As always, thank you so much for tuning into the Make Happiness Happen podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts. And even better, leave a positive review. If you want to dive deeper into the topics and discussions we have here, I would encourage you to head over to makehappinesshappen.com and sign up for my newsletter. It's the best way for us to get to know each other even better. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Make Happiness Happen podcast.